You probably know that Google and Facebook's business model is to save every piece of personal data you give them so they can target you with ads. But you may not know that Google and Facebook have trackers installed in nearly every website. They're also tracking everywhere you go. Every bit of data they collect gets added to the profile they have of you. And even creepier still, your profile also includes every connection they can find, everyone you know, and how you know them. Every new way they prompt you to engage helps them spy on you, intruding more and more into your life, until they know every private message you send, every dollar you spend, everything. There's only one way for Google to go: lower, dirtier, creepier, and more invasive, until they have their grimy fingers in every part of your private life. That's their business model.
Thank you. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this meeting. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you for being here. I want to first ask you about an allegation which actually the President surfaced on Monday. The President threatened to launch a treason investigation into Google for allegedly working with the Chinese government. The claim appears to be based on a comment, and I'll ask that report of that comment be entered in the record if there's no objection.
Without objection.
A Politico article dated July 16th. The claim appears to be based on Peter Thiel's allegation that Google has been somehow involved in treason. We know it's been a target of Chinese hacking, most prominently in 2009. Have you found any evidence of infiltration of your management or your private data by Chinese intelligence?
Absolutely not, Senator.
Has Google made any decision about its contracts with the United States government based on pressure or in consultation with China?
Absolutely not.
Has Google turned over or in any way turned a blind eye to a leak of its software or private data to Chinese intelligence?
Absolutely not. We take extremely seriously that the threat of any penetration of our systems.
And if Google's software, private data, or management is breached by a foreign intelligence agency, including China, will you commit to notifying this committee immediately?
Certainly, sir, and indeed we work closely with the law enforcement agencies of the U.S.
And
Yes.
other appropriate
Yes.
agencies. Thank you. I want to make an observation, which I think perhaps you've already sensed from the hearing, but also from comments made well prior to this hearing by myself over months, years, but by colleagues today on both sides of the aisle. The hourglass has run out on antitrust, on privacy, on moral imperative. Big tech, most particularly Google, is right now in the midst of a perfect storm. And it will require a restructuring and repurposing of what you do. And I hope that you are thinking radically, if I may use that term, not radically politically, but radically in terms of the role and responsibility that you have in modern American society. Because I think it has to be changed profoundly. My complaint about the Facebook settlement, so far as what we know of it right now, is not the abjectly inadequate amount of the proposed penalty. $5 billion is barely a tap, not even a slap on the wrist. But the apparent lack of any structural behavior or leadership reform that will be required. We don't know precisely what the outcome will be, but I think that it is more than a missed opportunity. It is a forsaken obligation if there is no radical order to restructure and change Facebook. On the issue that brings us here today, I want to first disclose that Robbie Parker is a former constituent of mine. His eldest daughter, his 6-year-old daughter, Emily, was killed in shooting that is painful for any of us to recall, but most especially for him. And so I want to thank him and pay tribute to his bravery and his courage for being here a second time. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, I should tell you that the Connecticut firm representing him in his lawsuit against Alex Jones is one where one of my sons, my oldest son, works as a lawyer, but he and I have not discussed this case. Mr. Parker and other parents of those children repeatedly went to Google. When Alex Jones and others used YouTube to quote, and I'm quoting him, regurgitate demonstrably and undeniably false information about the Sandy Hook shooting, while simultaneously attacking victims' families for profit, end quote. These lies were more than just false. They were malicious, they were cruel, they incited harassment, physical threats. They forced this family literally every day to relive their loss. And as Robbie Parker told us last time he was here, for too long Google and its peers were, quote unquote, complacent to the threats. This stuff is not speech, it's incitement, harassment, defamation. I respectfully suggest whatever your machines are, they're not working. Would you agree?
Senator, if I may, just again, our hearts go out to Mr. Parker and his family for that tragedy. We believe that hoax videos of the kind that you reference and he had to experience have no place on any of our platforms. And we have taken the challenge, the need to address that very seriously, including most recently amending our policies earlier this year, our community guidelines, to make clear that any such video that comes up will be taken down immediately. We do, again, given the quantity of video that gets uploaded at any point in time, we have to depend on tools, on machines to try and spot those videos. We constantly are trying to improve them. And they are improving. Where we miss something and it gets caught by another, a viewer, we then take action against it.
Well, speaking for Mr. Robbie Parker, who's not here today, but Annie Parker is, these kinds of policies, guidelines, forgive me, platitudes, are no substitute for effective enforcement. And I have said, if I've said it once, I've said it 100 times, the best policies, the best laws that we make are dead letter unless they're effectively enforced. I say that as someone who spent most of my career in enforcement, not legislating. And I have to conclude, given what I saw before today and then what Senator Hirono showed you, that the machines are not working, and that you are dependent as much on the victims coming to you, and then often the victims not believed or not heeded. And I guess I'm looking for a commitment that you'll do better machines, or you'll have different ways of detecting and different ways of enforcing, but again, not just guidelines or policies, but actually investing in what's needed to make these policies and guidelines real.
Senator, you absolutely have our commitment, my commitment, that will continue to invest in that space. All I can tell you is we don't want those kinds of videos up. It's certainly not conducive to the kind of community we're looking to build at YouTube. It is, given the sheer quantity of video that gets uploaded, it is a tough computer science challenge. But we can continue.
Who upload it.
Well,
You're
individuals
the one
will be
responsible for it. You happen to have a provision of law that dates from the inception of the internet that gives you, in my view, a very excessively broad shield of immunity. We can debate the merits of Section 230 at another time. But you can't simply unleash the monster and say it's too big to control. You have a moral responsibility, even if you have that legal protection. And again, with all due respect, I think there is a moral imperative here, and the hourglass has run out.
we agree that it is a responsibility that we and all platforms have to make sure that videos like that don't appear on our system.
And what specific steps are you going to take besides guidelines and policy?
A lot of it will come down to improving the algorithms. Improving the effectively the tools, the machine learning tools that we have to spot videos, to spot violative videos. Again, I will say that there's dramatic improvements happening in this space as technology improves. And we are already catching far more. People will sometimes put up videos that contain snippets or will contain a bit of video and then intersliced with other forms of video and then back to the video. So there's all sorts of tools that people sometimes try to utilize to get around our policies. And again, we're training machines to try and catch those as well. Ultimately, technology is going to have to be part of the solution here, and we're working.
My time is limited, but I want to ask you just a couple more questions. Has Google committed to an independent audit of how it enforces these policies, as Facebook and Twitter have promised?
We consult with many people on trying to figure out what the best way of meeting these challenges are, Senator. So we look to them for input on how we're doing. We're looking for advice on how best to meet the challenges.
About an independent audit. Facebook and Twitter promised it. Have you committed to it? I think the answer is no.
Not along the lines of what exactly you're referencing, I think, but we do.
The answer is no. Why not?
Well, are you talking about against hoax videos specifically, Senator?
Well, they've committed to an independent audit of how their policies and guidelines are enforced.
Again, there are a lot of individual policies and guidelines that we apply. So YouTube community guidelines is an example, our advertising guidelines, our search rater guidelines. There are a lot of different guidelines. Each one we utilize different forms of effectively testing and verification to see how we're doing. So I'm not sure that a single audit of the entirety of what our guidelines or policies are would be viable.
They committed to an audit of policy and guidelines specifically on civil rights, which is what has brought us here today.
So
Google committed to that same kind of audit.
We have not yet. I think it's something that we will be looking at. We certainly have a great deal of we look to the civil. We have engagement with the civil rights community, with leadership in that community to figure out how our.
So I want to ask you, and I apologize for
Please,
but last month one of your colleagues told the Commerce Committee, and I was doing some of the questioning, that recommendations for harmful misinformation have dropped, quote, by over 50% in the United States, end quote. These are views from YouTube's recommendation system, directed by YouTube itself from systems that it controls. Why have the number of views for harmful content dropped by only 1/2? Why hasn't the amount of traffic that YouTube itself is driving dropped to 0? You can control that.
I'm not sure I entirely followed the question, Senator, but let me see. So the recommendation system that you're referencing beforehand, right. We have seen a significant diminution as we've implemented policies earlier this year that are designed to sort of get at some of these kinds of content that you're referencing before, so maybe hoax videos or content that tends to be anti-vax kind of content, marginal content, significantly deprioritized as we have improved our algorithms for what is recommended. So we have seen a significant decrease in that. We're going to continue to work on it. With respect to, I'm sorry, I didn't follow the other part of the question.
Well, I guess the question is, why haven't you reduced it to zero? And I'm going to yield back, Mr. Chairman, because
Okay. Happy to continue to engage. Thank you, Senator.
Or we can
please
pursue it in written.
Happy to. Thank you.
Feuer trunken, himmlische dein